Night folds over the Euphrates like a silk shawl, and the river remembers. It carries the day's warmth in slow, sighing currents, gathering glimmers of lantern light, as if collecting scattered stars. Boats drift with hush-soft oars, their lamps tremble on the water, twin fires walking side by side. Sand smells of sun gone to sleep. Date palms murmur, somewhere a camel coughs and settles, and the city exhales. Babylon does not sleep as a person sleeps. It dozes with one eye open, listening through its bricks. The walls keep stories in their baked hearts, and the gates breathe them out again, word by word, into the velvet air. Along the quay, traders fold their stalls like tired wings, yet their whispers travel farther than the goods they counted. A child carries bread, and a priest carries silence. Each leaves ripples the river understands. The temples hold a slow heartbeat. Incense climbs, like pale vines, curling around moonlit columns. A hand sweeps grain across a stone bowl, and the sound is almost a tide. In the shadowed market, a woman balances copper on her head. Behind her, a scribe oils his stylus, writing nothing, remembering everything. Dogs pad through alleys, noses bright with night. Above all, the sky leans down, generous and near. Power here once moved like water, invisible but heavy, tugging at lives the way the moon pulls at the river's skin. We are told kings ruled with iron, but iron is loud. Power in Babylon was often a breath, a gesture at a doorway, a spoken name cancelled by a bell. Some say, right small as pinpricks, careful as stitches, taught armies when to advance, taught harvests when to fill. Listened long enough, and the silence lifts its veil. The echoes still align with the current, as if the past keeps a fingertip on. Walls glow faintly where glaze catches moonlight, blue as dusk. The boats keep drifting. Lanterns draw thin roads across the black. A soft wind still combs the reeds. Then, from the temple quarter, the first drumlow, steady, like the river turning in its sleep. The gate rises like midnight made solid, its blues deep enough to drink, its bricks catching moonlight in a slow, cool breath. Lions step along the walls with gold-tipped paws, not as ornament, but as instructions. Courage authorized, borders declared. Between them stride bulls and the long-scaled serpent with a horned head, the creature that watches crossroads and vows. Each animal is a sentence, and together they speak a grammar of power the city learned to read in passing. Priests once counted these shapes like beads, noting sequences the way sailors track stars. A lion after a bull meant protection before petition. A serpent repeated near an arch called for silence from rivals. Even the glaze itself blue like river shadow marked a rank. Only this gate could wear the sky. Processions moving beneath it became entries in a ledger, each step authenticated by the beasts overhead. Children memorized paths by creatures, not corners. Guards chose where to stand by omens baked into patterns. The faithful touched a paw or horn as if turning a key. What seems like decoration is the city's quiet codebase, lines of ritual compiled into masonry, updating with each festival, yet familiar as breath. Consider a symbol that outlives the hand that drew it. The city falls, dust softens the road, yet the lions keep walking along their blue. Who do they protect when crowds are gone? What bargain do they recall when the language rusts away? Perhaps the symbols keep working, like a lamp lit in an empty room, drawing moths no one named, guiding those who wander with questions more than with maps. They hum when nobody listens. They endure. Lantern light pools at the threshold, and a trail of dusty crescents leads away, faint as sighs. We follow the footprints, quiet, toward the ziggurat. The ziggurat waits like a mountain taught to stand still. Tear on tear, its shoulders rise from the dust, each platform a pause where breath evens and thoughts grow small. Night presses close, but the bricks keep a quiet fire, storing the day's sun as if authority could be warmed and passed hand to hand. From below, summit seems higher ground. From above, every street curls inward, offering its attention. Architecture is a choreographer. Steps calibrate the heart. Landings time the glance. With altitude, voices thin and deference thickens. A priest lifts a lamp and becomes a lighthouse. A king climbs, and the city watching the figure grow rarer feels its knees bend. We are told the stairs are for gods, for winds, for prayers that prefer heights. Yet people ascend in their name, and the miracle returned is often human. What if the ritual of climbing measured feet, controlled breath, a public hush following the climber does half the work? The tears manufacture distance, and distance breeds awe. At the top, a gesture floats farther. A blessing sounds like weather. Even doubts feel winded and choose to rest. Perhaps the god receives the smoke, and perhaps the king receives the city. Both exchanges occur on the same thin stage. Power, like incense, rises when given a column to rise along. Whether heaven answers or not, authority condenses in the chilled air. Torches bloom along the stair, beads of fire threading upward. Boots scrape, a low chant, slow as the river, gathers and begins. The chant moves like a tide around the ziggurat, but above it the sky keeps a steadier rhythm. Priests step onto the terrace with cords and rods, eyes soft to the dark, and begin their nightly arithmetic. They arrange the stars the way farmers lay seed, row by row, watching where the planet lamps wander and where they pause. Time, here, is not a straight road. It is a bowl the heavens tilt, and Babylon learns to drink when told. They call it observation, but it is also negotiation. If the moon fattens by the seventh night, dues are brought 3 days later. If Venus wakes before dawn, caravans wait. If Mars lingers, governors sharpen alerts. A calendar is a treaty signed in starlight and enforced at daylight. Rations, taxes, temple wages, even wedding songs submit to columns of clay. The city trusts what is written because the writing matches the sky, and who argues with that? Yet matching gives the priests a key. Declare a leap day, and grain moves like soldiers. Slide a festival, and armies gather under auspicious fire. The clock is a circle, but it tightens like a leash when held in trained hands. We are told the heavens are free, but their map is a set of gates. Someone decides when to open them. Not all control is harsh. The night calendar calms panic, blunts rumor, holds back rash spears. It nods to the river's flood, and to the gardener's thumb. Still, power likes predictability, and prediction likes the one who predicts. Above, the chant thins. Below, markets sleep, knowing whose morning it will be. A small lamp brightens in a corner room. A scribe warms his fingers, brushes sand from a slate of clay, and rolls a fresh tablet between his palms for the city. Clay cools the room like a shallow pond, and the scribe works by lamplight, kneading a palm-sized square until it listens. The city speaks most clearly when the earth is wet. He dips his reed in water, breathes once, and sets the first wedge. Each stroke is a footstep across soft ground. Each line is a path no wind can erase. At this table, vows arrive with the hush of slippers. Traders lean close, naming dates and measures. A widow names her dowry as if rescuing it from a river. Debts fold into neat rows, gentle as stacked loaves. Promises stand shoulder to shoulder, warming each other. The clay receives them all without judgment, holding heat the way a hand holds another hand. Writing is not only record, it is rehearsal. While the reed taps and turns, the heart rehearses keeping its word. You can feel resolve thicken as syllables settle. A man who means to waver stands steadier when he hears the click of count. Even the quiet between symbols has weight. The pauses are rooms where conscience sits. Some oaths need only the night to harden. By morning the tablet is leopard speckled with lamp ash and thumbprints proof. That will confossilize before the sun wakes. The city curls into this silence and trusts it, long after voices forget the shape of a bargain. These bricks remember. The god passes through the city on shoulders, high enough to catch every lantern's breath. Garlands sway, drums behave like heartbeat, and the crowd becomes a river, parting and closing as if guided by tide. Hands rise, some to praise, some to measure. Children stare at the gilded gaze and feel seen. Mothers whisper the old lines. A man swears his luck turns warmer just by standing near the wheels. Wonder, it seems, is well rehearsed. Behind the shimmer, chords hide in threads of night. The litter's tilt is corrected by a touch you would miss unless you watched the watchers. At corners, someone coughs twice. At the signal, incense thickens to veil a turn. An acolyte counts steps with a seed in each pocket, shifting them one by one. The statue appears to bless a widow because a runner found her first. Miracles choose their angles. Asterisk public myth walks in daylight, but backstage mechanics keep the feet from stumbling. A priest with ink on his cuticles folds a list, where to pause, whose debt to forgive, which stall to inspect for purity. The god bows at the exact height of the governor's pride. The lion crest glitters right when the singer reaches the promised note. We are told divine favor drifts like pollen. Perhaps it also follows stage direction. Does this lessen the glow, or teach us how glow is built? Ritual is a loom. Belief is the thread. Hands draw the pattern tight. Wonder arrives as planned and then, sometimes, escapes the plan when a child laughs at the wrong moment. When the moon walks out from a cloud and all the careful cues grow quiet. A bell takes a single breath between beats. Coins ring softly in bowls, but grain speaks louder. In the temple's cool belly, offerings arrive like small rivers, streaming into jars, baskets, sealed rooms. A goat becomes silver measured by thumb. Silver becomes barley. Barley becomes the promise of next month's bread. Piety enters on bare feet and leaves wearing sandals called palacy. Here, generosity is sorted like figs by ripeness. Sacks are tallied, weights kissed against stone. What the faithful give does not sleep. It circulates. A merchant borrows seed with a blessing. A caravan carries the god's symbol on a ribbon. Safe passage disguised as devotion. Interest hides in the calendar, sweetened by festivals, enforced by drought. Graнаries are the quiet lungs of the city. When harvests are thin, their doors open like sunrise for some. Favor travels along familiar names. Families who loaned oxen for the last procession. Scribes who can find a day in the ledger when none seems available. A ruler's decree is heavy. The temple makes it portable. Deference takes the shape of measuring scoops. We are told the altar burns for heaven, yet its smoke also signals credit. Debts forgiven on holy days glow brighter than torches. Debts extended after a comet feels sanctioned by the sky. People bow, and grain moves. The gods' houses breathe, and laws arrive already warmed by incense. It is not a trick, only a system with candles lit. Somewhere a key turns. The room tightens. A clerk moistens his reed. A locked room, a ledger, a whisper. The river at night is a slow mirror, and it listens. Men of rank come down with their cloaks held clear of the mud, each carrying a word he must chain to something larger than himself. The water is dark as unbaked clay. A priest dips a bowl, lifts it to the stars, and names the chaos beneath the city. Flood, serpent, drift. Another touches the surface with a reed until rings chase one another like rumors. Then the vow is spoken, and the river keeps it, cool and impartial. To swear by water is to risk returning to it. If a governor lies, let his fields unravel like foam. If a general breaks faith, let the current find his camp at midnight and scatter the fires. The threats are not shouted. They are told in the tone of weather, inevitable, unhurried. The kind of promise you cannot argue with because it is a shape, not a sentence. Far above, the sky arranges itself into rules. A platform waits on the terrace, and the nobles climb with quiet feet. Oil lamps make little suns, obedient and still. Here, the oath is tied to order, to Orion's belt, to the patient river of stars that never spills. Names are spoken in measured breath. Seals touch a cold stone. The priest's hand hovers, counting heartbeats. To swear by stars is to be watched. Break the line you drew with your mouth, and let your line in the sky dim. Let your house forget its own doorway. Power bows to the map it pretends to command. The city's strongest men accept the leash because it is braided of water and light, the two things they cannot hold. The river turns under the moon like a page, and Babylon's lines keep reading themselves aloud. By now the pattern feels simple, gentle, symbol, schedule, surplus. 3 threads twist into a rope sturdy enough to tow kingdoms across centuries. We have walked beneath lines that behave like laws, watched nights subdivided into obedient hours, and seen grain breathe in dark rooms until it becomes obedience with a tally mark. Power here is not only a shout, it is a habit taught to a city until the heart beats on cue. When empires change their costumes, the braid remains. In later courts, eagles replace lions, crowns replace horned serpents, yet the instruction is the same. Look, believe, behave. Bells become tower clocks, then factory whistles, then glowing digits on wrists, telling bodies when to rise, feed the fires, rest. Granaries learn to call themselves treasuries, then banks. Ledgers molt into paper, then light, but they still decide whose morning will be easy and whose will be steep. Consider a coronation filmed from 6 angles, the camera panning like a priest's hand. Consider a fiscal year nudged with a pen that moves the planting of profits, and an interest rate that makes caravans wait without a single guard at the gate. Consider a company seal, now a logo, pressed onto packages and screens so that trust travels faster than foot. We are told we live in a world freed from myth, yet our days still file past symbols, our hours kneel to calendars, and our courage thins or thickens beside vaults that hum like granaries. The names change, the choreography holds dot. This is the first hook. The rites did not die. They learned new names and kept working. The lions keep walking. The clocks keep circling. The storehouses keep humming. We will trace how spectacle scripts consent, how time is tuned to tighten or slacken leash, how surplus learns to speak in the voice of fate. The map is old, but the streets are near. Shadows lean inward as we step beyond the crowd and into the breathing hush. The inner court is smaller than the stories promised, which makes everything feel nearer. Stone, smoke, the careful eyes of those who keep the rules. Nothing here is violent. Everything is deliberate. Even the flame seems to practice its posture, rising without hurry, bowing as if to an unseen cue. We will move carefully, not to unveil secrets with a shout, but to notice how a heart tilts when a room is arranged to guide it. Tonight we ask what enthronement does to a face, how a man learns to sit higher without growing cruel, and how a city rehearses believing in him. We will watch the crown arrive like weather, testing what it does to breath. Does it steady, or does it tighten? We will listen for the old figure who carries away fault. No blood, no spectacle, only a pattern the mind cannot stop following. If a single body bears the city's blame and walks into the dark, what light returns to the rest? Where does relief end and habit begin? The scapegoat might be an animal, or a shirt turned inside out, or a story retold until it forgets a name. The trick, if there is one, hides in how release is measured. We will chart star laws. 2. The quiet contracts people write with the sky. When rules descend like dew, they feel gentler, and the consent that rises to meet them appears freely given. Yet someone sets the basin where the dew collects. Lastly, silence. Not emptiness, but a tuned instrument. Who speaks, who waits, whose pause changes the room. In these halls, restraint is a language, and every withheld word becomes a gate that opens only when asked correctly. They say a crown is placed once, and a life changes. In Babylon, the wise counted to 2. The first ceremony flowered in daylight, banners, lions bright on blue walls, crowds rising like wheat to the sun. A king climbed, bowed, and stood. The city inhaled. Hands lifted the circle of gold, as if moving a moon. Trumpets braided noise into certainty. The gesture looked simple, which is why it worked on hearts. But there was always a second binding. Quiet, meant to reach roots. After the torches burned lower and markets folded back into dusk, the king returned to rooms where the bricks remembered names. He removed what the day had given ring, sword, mantle, and knelt with empty palms. A priest spoke the grammar of power. Vows stripped to bone, breath aligned to the old measures. The crown did not return at once. It hovered in words, in silence, in the still weight of waiting. Redundancy, we call it in soft voices. In temples it is mercy for belief. If the crowd's heat faded, if doubts scratched at doors, the second rite mended the weave. Public splendor apprenticed the eyes. Private reconsecration apprenticed the spine. Should a king tremble, the ritual steadied him. Should he grow hard, the same words, sanded corners. The spell rehearsed the city's trust and the ruler's restraint until both felt practiced and durable. Witness the paired logic. A throne that can be given twice can also be kept through storms. If an omen breaks the first declaration, the second remains like a lantern sheltered by walls. If rumor stains the night, the secret litany washes it, bead by bead. The crown thus becomes less a thing and more a rhythm, placed, paused, placed again, teaching a body to carry weight without breaking. At dawn, nothing seems different. That is the point. Streets find their pulse. Bakers draw warm circles from ovens, and the river walks on. Yet somewhere in the masonry, the echo of 2 ceremonies hums like a memory of thunder promising clear weather. Spring draws its first true breath, and the city answers as if waking on cue. Gates are brushed clean, garlands stitched, thresholds dusted with flour, so footprints read like poems. The Yakub begins with small corrections, a cracked jar replaced, a lintel straightened, a quarrel postponed until after the god has stretched. Renewal travels outward from gestures you could miss, and then the wave gathers. Asterisk crowds lean toward the processional way, bright with wreaths and river sky glaze. The statue leaves its chamber and becomes a traveler again, escorted past lions that blink in sunlight. Priests carry boxes sealed with cords, and a boy rings a bell, not for grandeur but for timing. A city rehearses being new, and rehearsal, practiced long enough, grows real. They say the fate tablets are renewed, the writing softened by prayer and overwritten with calmer lines. Fishermen hoped for gentle floods. Mothers whispered the names of infants to teach the year how to hold them. Governors crane their necks. Renewal sounds warm, but it is also a ledger with margins and erasers. If destiny can be reinscribed, a hand must be holding the stylus. Who guides it? Whose pauses mean mercy? Whose haste becomes tax? In the temple courtyard, roles are briefly inverted. A king surrenders regalia and stands bare to the calendar's gaze. He is struck lightly, not to harm, but to reset the instrument that records his name. Tears are invited like rain. If they come, the streets will shine. The city believes again because it has practiced believing again. By evening, the world is declared upright, the wheel centered on its axle. Lanterns are lit, and the murmur steadies, expectant. On a table, a clay envelope sighs under a damp cloth. Chords are loosened, prayers thin to listening. A tablet is unrolled. The chamber is quiet enough to hear fabric breathe. A crown waits on a folded cloth, and the king removes his rings as if unhooking small suns from his hands. He kneels. The floor is cool, the kind of cool that persuades heat to listen. A priest ink on his fingers. Salt at his temples recites the old inventory of faults. Not to accuse, but to loosen pride's knot. Titles are set aside like sandals by a doorway. For a moment, he is a citizen with an unusual posture. The slap is not loud. It lands like a ruler's tap on a desk, a correction that reaches marrow. The king's face tilts, and his eyes water because eyes often do when struck. The room tilts with them. These are not private tears. They are instruments. If they fall, order has a way to climb back in through the opened gate. If they do not, the gate needs oil. Or holds its breath. We are told king's command storms. Here they must weather mist. A basement is a tempering, a way to replug a life into the wall of law. By kneeling, power finds its circuit again, the current smoothing into a steady line. The city learns something steadying. Authority can bend without breaking, and in bending, it remembers what it serves. No blood, no spectacle, just the long ripple of a silence everyone can read. The crown seems heavier for having waited. The priest lowers his gaze, then raises his hand for the smallest pause. The tears, if present, shine. The priests read the tears. Night does not simply arrive. It is invited, timed, and seated according to plan. On the terrace, charts rest like folded weather maps, and the priests trace thin roads between planets and stars. They are not guessing futures. They are measuring chances. A bright Venus near the horizon loosens markets. Mars lurking near a threshold tightens helmets and tongues. The sky becomes a board of signals, and decisions wait for conditions aligning. When people say astrology, they imagine a whisper about destiny. Babylon answers with calendars. If Jupiter stands in a friendly house, caravans depart with fewer guards and fuller ledgers. If the moon fattens near a node, the harvest is delayed a handful of nights, enough to bend risk without breaking plans. Good stars lower the tide where ships pass. Bad stars raise it, and ask for patience. It is not magic, but scheduling with a longer ruler. The method is simple and stubborn. Mark omens as you would rainfall. Compare years. Keep the best habits. The priests do not command the heavens. They keep company with them until the city learns when not to push against storms. A treaty signed under a clean sky travels farther. A decree on an ill-starred day grows edges and returns with cuts. Over time, skeptics nod. Fewer surprises is a kind of blessing. This is how OH sits beside logic. People sleep better when choices feel synchronized with something older than their nerves. The king listens, less for prophecy than for rhythm. He wants his footfall to meet the stair when the note is right. wants doors to open with the grain of night, not against it. Around the terrace, in measured silence, attendants lift shields of bronze to catch the lamp glow. One by one, lamps align like constellations above us. The idol sits within a room that smells of cedar and stone. By daylight, attendants bathe the statue with water scented like river reeds, patting bronze and gold as if tending a sleeping elder. They lift bowls to unmoving lips, set bread in reach, and murmur the day's schedule. None of this is play. It is paperwork with incense. A god who is washed is a god who is awake, capable of hearing petitions and issuing answers that carry weight beyond a man's breath. When the city must decide canal gates, a border quarrel, the idol is consulted. Questions are shaped into narrow paths, yes or no, now or later. Lots are drawn, omens balanced against records, and the result is read aloud as the god's will. The statue's presence changes the grammar. A temple vote is not opinion. It is minutes from a meeting where eternity keeps the chair. Legal person is a modern phrase, but the habit is old. The idol owns land, lends barley, receives fines, forgives them. Contracts cite the house of the god, as if addressing a neighbor. If someone cheats, it is not a clerk he wrongs. It is a being whose eyes do not blink, and whose patience is measured by festivals. This lengthens everyone's caution. Policy feels less like force and more like duty. At dusk, the attendants open shutters to let the sky look in. The idol faces the wind as if listening for a thought. Somewhere nearby, an oracle curtain sways in the inner room. Lamps breathe like small animals, and questions arrive with sand still clinging to their sandals. The petition is simple on the surface. Should the army cross? Should the price be raised? Should the governor stay? But the heir knows the answer. Will wear two coats. A priest draws lots, studies smoke, listens to the hollow between drumbeats. He speaks slowly, leaving joints between words, so the sentence can bend if it must. The river welcomes the careful, he says, or the road shortens for the patient. Nothing false, nothing pinned. To the eager, it means now. To the weary, it means wait. A ruler hears direction without losing exits. Ambiguity is not fog, it is oil on the hinge, a way to keep doors from protesting when they move. Oracles learn the art the way singers learn breath. Speak in images that carry in weather. Leave one noun loose, one verb with a porch on either side. Promise harvest after the lion sleeps. Promise peace before the third lamp gutters. And time becomes a partner eager to cooperate. If events lean one way, the words lean with them. If they sway back, the words politely follow, still correct. This is how a city keeps its balance. The people believed they were cautioned. The court believes it was encouraged. No one must confess misreading the sky. Skeptics call it hedging. Priests call it care. The idol's silence agrees with both. Sometimes an oracle is sharpened by need of famine. A siege, and even then the edges are wrapped. Do not drink the first flood, the voice declares, which means ration or repair or retreat, according to which margin can be saved. Counsel travels farther when it does not bruise. Warm air gathers under cedar beams, and the hall brightens as lamps meet platters. Musicians pluck a gentle river, easy enough for talk. The god is thanked, the king seated, and the benches breathe with neighbors who become, for a night, one household together. Spices lift like birds, circling the rafters before settling softly. Bread opens like a book written in steam. A feast is a map of belonging. Places are chosen with a quiet geometry. Closer to the center means closer to the story. Portions confirm it. A shoulder for governors, a rib for captains, ripe dates for the gatekeepers. Cups refill in patterns the hand remembers while the mind laughs quietly. The order of serving recites the city without names. Warmth does the preaching. People lean, trade jokes, count blessings that taste of cumin and smoke. Yet the plate is also policy. The slice you receive is a sentence, read kindly in public, carefully in private. Extra bread travels to a widow. A careful slice finds the steward who arrives early. Favors hide in fig leaves. Loyalty is salted like meat. Leftovers do not sleep. They become promises carried home, a parcel for a caravan chief, a sweet for the magistrate's child, barley cakes for singers who mended a quarrel in song. Tomorrow's yes is folded into tonight's basket. Along the wall, a servant pauses, listening for a name. He finds it, lifts a tray, and walks the steady curve of benches, unhurrying, a tray diverted to a patron. At first light, the city looks held together by walls and gates. By night, you can feel the other structure, the soft net of promises drawn tight between lamps. An oath is a road you cannot see, a path laid from mouth to mouth, sealed with a god's listening and a reed's neat wedge. Officials swear to posts, captains to signals, stewards to weights that do not cheat. Traders swear to arrival, carriers to silence, singers to the truth inside a tune. The net thickens where hands meet often, thins where fear has eaten trust, then is rewoven with care. Each vow has anchors, a seal kisses wet clay, a bracelet is exchanged, a touch to the lion's paw at the gate makes the air witness, words braid with tokens so that failure must break more than pride to run free. Most oaths are small and daily grain delivered, shutters mended, news carried clean. Some are mountainous governors who promise not to summon soldiers without stars aligned, priests who promise not to shorten the fast for friends. The weight of these lines is felt in calm. Streets sleep because they believe morning will behave. Enforcement seldom needs shouting. Shame moves like weather. A broken oath draws frost toward doorways. Neighbors step lightly. Trade looks elsewhere. Temple ledges tighten. A favorable hour is quietly moved. To keep one promise is to keep 10 more by echo. To break one is to bruise the map. What lasts longest is not a building but the habit that breathes inside it. The palace can shift hands, the gate can change emblems, yet the oath network remains patched and polished by use. You can hear it in the way names are spoken, in cups refilled before asking, in doors opening at the soft knock that matches a remembered rhythm. Night walks the alleys with bare feet, and the city listens for anyone tempted to step out of line. Laws exist, written and counted. Yet the sharp offense is wider, woven from words that claim the river and the stars as witnesses. Penalties here are not just fees, they are whether one invites. To disobey is to open windows to a storm that knows your name. The formulas are simple and terrible in their calm. If you alter the measure, may your house measure you back and find you lacking. If you tilt the scales, may your fields lean away from rain. If you break the seal, may doors forget you. The curses do not snarl. They arrange images and let the mind finish the sentence. A governor imagines barley turning to dust at his touch. A scribe feels his ink dry. Imagination recruited becomes the strictest guard. Because the threats are cosmic, they travel without soldiers. A rumor that the sky has withdrawn favor will empty a courtyard faster than spears. Mothers repeat the versions to children, smoothing hair while naming stars. Be faithful, and Orion will keep watch. Betray, and the path home will tie itself in knots. Men of rank, who scoff at fines, still glance up before a risky lie. Temple language deepens the groove. May he be salt scattered, the priest in prince. May his name grow small in the mouths of his friends. May his shade wander thirsty. Each phrase is a picture the listener cannot refuse to see. And once seen, it hangs like a charm with teeth. People begin to police themselves because no guard can stand against the sky that remembers dot. Sometimes mercy is written beside the blade. Restore what you took, and the river will cool its stare. Feed the widow, and the dust will lift from your threshing floor. Even this is governance. The road back is paved with tasks, and so order repairs itself. In the lamplight, a tablet cools on a shelf. Lines harden. Somewhere a seal turns, slow as a moon. A curse is baked into clay. Crowns have a habit of slipping. Methods do not. When palaces empty and names on bricks fade to a warm blur, the scaffolding of rule keeps walking in other clothes. Conquerors arrive with fresh banners and old needs. To be believed, to be timed, to be supplied. They try their keys, then copy the ones found here, polished by many hands. Symbols travel first. A lion becomes an eagle, a sun disk becomes a halo, and streets learn the new grammar with little complaint. Processions continue because feet remember routes better than mouths remember slogans. Scribes repaint emblems, but the choreography underneath, who stands where, who bows when survives like music heard through walls. Next comes the schedule. A calendar is taught the new Lord's birthday and keeps ticking. The same priests, or students by other names, measure dawns and declare safe weeks for caravans, quiet days for decrees. bright hours for treaties. The clock is indifferent to coats and crowns. It serves whoever asks with the right questions. Surplus chooses the steadiest vault. Granaries blink and call themselves treasuries. Ledgers molt into scripts foreign and familiar. Loans resume with seals newly carved. And the temple economy, now temple court market braided breathes, as if rulers changed like seasons, not species. Oaths knit the seams. New captains swear by an emblem that lives where the old one lived. Penalties keep their shape, only metaphors shift. Where river and star once warned, now law and empire do. Imagination still feels watched. Banquets make room for different titles. Portions still speak. Oracles soften or sharpen with fashion, yet ambiguity keeps oiling the hinge. Scripts change alphabets. Habits mostly keep their meaning. All this makes defeat survivable for the method. A monarch can be carted away, yet the city wakes to the same rhythm. Lamps aligned, drums patient, inventories neat as prayer. What survives are frameworks honest about gravity. People look, people plan, people store. Those who tune these three inherit the rest, so the pattern departs one capital and enters another, like a river leaving a bend to find a new bank to polish. The map widens east and west. Night folds even tighter in the divination chamber, where lamps bloom like patient flowers. The air is cedar, salt, and a whisper of wool. A shallow bronze bowl waits on a low table. Beside it, a jug of oil holds the dark like a closed eye. Priests settle into the quiet with practiced shoulders. They do not chase answers, they invite them and let them land. The first drop slides across the water and opens a pale circle. Another follows, and the rings kiss, separate, and drift small countries forming and unforming in a single breath. A hand lifts a lamp closer, flame leans, and shadows on the wall begin their soft argument. Here, pattern is a guest who speaks only when the room listens well. No one claims the oil can command tomorrow. It only shows tendencies, offers a rumor of the river's next turn. A cluster to the east rim hints at crowded roads. Traders will be thirsty, so grain should move early. A seam runs steady across the bowl. Caravans should stagger their departures. When a drop refuses to break and sits, gleaming like an unshed tear, the city reads stubbornness in a governor and chooses patience over challenge. They mark the bowl with chalk, the way sailors mark a wind. A scribe records only what endures across nights. 2 lamps make a harbor, 3 lamps, a triangle that repeats, and policy grows from recurring angles. The room keeps mercy for doubt. If the omen is shy, the question is narrowed. The timing moved, the stakes softened. Diviners prefer gentle edits to grand pronouncements. Small course changes avoid SHIPWRECKS. Sometimes the oil refuses advice and scatters into petals, beautiful and useless. The priests smile at that too. Mystery has its job. We are not meant to own the dark, only to walk with it until it shows a path our feet recognize. The clay liver rests on the table like a city. Ridges rise where veins would run. Squares and gates mark zones named for winds, planets, and temperaments. To touch it is to open a book written before paper, each notch a remembered weather, each bevel a story kept from wandering. The priests call it instruction, not miracle. The model teaches hands to notice, and noticing becomes knowledge dependable enough to steer ships of grain. When a real liver is examined, the clay stands nearby like a map you glance at while traveling. Diviners compare. A bright swelling where King's Gate sits on the model, a scar along the enemy's road, a hollow near the harbor of verdicts. Over time, repeated pairings form a ledger of tendencies. A fullness here accompanies safe treaties. A roughness there precedes market quarrels. The city builds policy from these correlations the way farmers build furrow straight, but ready to bend. Standard cuts and names keep frenzy out. Apprentices learn the same vocabulary, the same quadrants, the same sequence. Observe, describe, compare, record. If the surface is smooth, do not pretend a mountain. If signs disagree, lower the stakes and revisit at moonrise. This is data, arranged to behave. The clay's edges train the eye not to invent patterns, only to recognize them when they repeat with a weight. What seems occult is disciplined memory. One priest's insight is copied into many hands, so that tomorrow's reader can test yesterday's certainty. Errors are not curses, There are notes in the margin that save costlier errors later. The handbook grows by modesty. Label what you saw, anchor it to outcome, reserve judgment until the list lengthens. In lamplight, the model shines like river mud cooling after flood. A student leans near, breath steady, and a finger traces a groove. Before decisions grew teeth, Babylon asked the night to clear its throat. An omen was not a red light, it was a checklist. One sign could sparkle by accident, two could conspire, but three began to resemble weather. Priests taught governors to wait for the pattern to repeat in sky, in smoke, in oil settling, or a bird crossing. Only then did a plan take its shoes and breathe. Protocols softened pride and haste. A commander learned to phrase intent like a question. If Venus smiles and the wind turns, we go. If the moon sulks or the liver's gate is rough, we mend our harness and buy more grain. Redundancy tamed bravado better than scolding. When signs conflicted, the stakes were lowered, the route curved, the dates slid a few nights forward. Asterisk omens also carried the weight of blame away from one throat. If a harvest failed after an honest reading, it was the year that misbehaved, not the steward. If a crossing went wrong despite clear lamps and clean birds, risk had been paid due, and the ledger of faults stayed thin. This did not erase responsibility. It shared it with the elements so people could try again without drowning in shame. Call it superstition if you like. The city called it prudence. Gather signals, test them, repeat. Move when the pattern is strong, pause when it frays. That is how nerves sleep before a hard morning. The night above Babylon is not empty. It is a library without walls. Stars take their places the way letters settle into lines, and priests read them aloud with patient eyes. What seems like wonder is also filing. Each bright appearance is dated, each odd pairing described, each eclipse given a line like a careful sigh. A boy carries a lamp. An elder names the hour. A scribe leans over clay and presses memory into mud. The sky turns, and the shelves grow. Centuries make a book thick enough to rest a kingdom on. In the reign of so-and-so, Jupiter sat near the lion's shoulder. Caravans prospered. In the 7th month of the year without figs, a red star lingered at the gate. The river rose to warm. No thunder, no shouting, just observation placed beside outcome until patterns start to nod. The city learns a gentle stubbornness. Keep watching, keep writing, let the ledger teach. This is the opposite of panic. When a comet lifts its slow, white brush, no one runs. They open previous pages to see which stories rhymed. Not all do. The catalogue includes disagreement like a mature family includes quiet. Omen, unclear. Some tablets confess, and the honesty itself becomes a lantern. A habit of truth lets the next reader judge without fear. Over time the archive breeds small inventions. Better water clocks to time risings. Finer chords to cite angles. A temple terrace leveled so precisely that doubt slides off the edges at dawn. Every improvement says the same soft sentence. Memory deserves clean tools. The priests are not guarding secrets. They are attending to a garden of facts, watering them with patience, pruning with restraint. Lanterns dim, breath evens, fingers sandy with learning stack, new tablets beside old ones, edges aligned like stars in order. The tablet shelf extends. They say the mind opens when the body lies like a field before rain. In the temples dreaming, court, pilgrims wash, loosen belts, and lie beneath mats while lamps murmur along the walls. You bring a question-lost cow, sick child, a stubborn quarrel and hand it to the dark like a letter at a door. Sleep is not passive here, it is instructed. Feet point toward the idol, reeds rustle under the head to invite awakenings. An offering, white spread, oil, a coin's soft ring to pay for decoding. What comes is a ribbon of pictures, a hawk circling twice, a cracked jar that suddenly holds water, a staircase of mist. You wake, throat pulsing, as if something answered without using a mouth. Gatekeepers receive the telling. They listen the way surgeons listen, trimming exaggeration, anchoring each image to shelves of recorded echoes. A hawk means news from the east. If it lands, a debt arriving. The cracked jar warns about trust. The mist stare counsels humility before petition. Meanings are not free, they are minted. The temple owns the molds and chooses which coin to press into your palm. Interpretation allocates power. A governor's dream can shift a levy. A baker's dream can move a marriage day. Some nights the message feels like mercy, some like choreography. Either way, order wakes, strengthened by what sleep lets it claim. Clarity has a doorway, and someone minds it. Before a question meets oil or stars, a small tray appears, a list of offerings suggested, another of fees politely fixed. The temple calls them tokens of respect. The city understands them as prices that keep the lights steady. A simple reading asks for bread and a coin. A time-sensitive crisis needs wine, incense, and a scribe's hour. Priced higher because haste must borrow someone else's sleep. Gifts smooth the edge of fate. A governor sends cedar and receives a longer session. A caravan guild donates barley and earns priority on nights when storms crowd answers. Exemptions exist. Widows, injured soldiers, children with fevers, but even mercy has ledgers. The fee is waived, the debt is remembered, and in a kinder season it returns as labor or grain. No one says it aloud, yet everyone counts. When ambiguity is costly, clarity becomes a commodity. A cleaner sign, found on a level terrace with 5 lamps and a rested priest, is worth more than a hurried answer in a noisy courtyard. People learn the tiers, public lots for ordinary worries, private consultations for weights that could tilt a province. The veil between them is woven with coins and favors. Payment also protects the priesthood from accusation. If the reading offends, the refund is ritual, a substitute jar of oil, an extra hour pledged at new moon, not an apology. The system keeps faces calm and tempers cool. Value is acknowledged, resentment redirected toward chance instead of throats. Behind the math, generosity survives. Some patrons endow free nights, paying for strangers to ask the sky. The ledger notes the donor's name and the hour that grew lighter because of it. In time, these gifts create their own weather, gratitude that lifts the room's breath before the question begins. Some nights the world agrees to be theatrical. A herald shouts, and lamps bow lower. An omen approaches, he says, as if weather had knocked politely. People tip their faces skyward. When the moon slides into the earth's shadow right on schedule, though few know the schedule, the gasp arrives on cue. Priests call it a warning, or a mercy, as the year requires. The city aligns its fear with the story, and steadies. Portents multiply when a ruler needs a wind at his back. A string breaks on a temple harp the moment a decree is read. A sacred bird lands on a chosen roof, and lingers while messengers count to 30. Oil sloshes in a bowl to form a perfect ring when the audience is widest. None of this is impossible by chance. Yet backstage, boys time shutters to spill a gust when smoke must tilt, and a mirror nudges moonlight onto a statue's brow so the god seems newly attentive. The trick, if there is one, is not malice but management. Atmosphere is coached until chance looks like consent. People are grateful to be escorted through uncertainty. They prefer a charted shiver to a nameless chill. Even skeptics keep still, knowing a well-timed sign can prevent a poorly timed riot. If the eclipse is announced before the darkness, panic has somewhere safe to sit. Paper rustles, a queue passes hand to hand. Lanterns listen, somewhere a soft pulley breathes. A hinge learns to keep quiet. A curtain hides devices. There are nights when the chamber chooses not to speak. Lamps hold their flames as if cupping a secret. The oil lies untroubled, a dark eye refusing to blink. The priest watches the surface a little longer, then lowers the reed and shakes his head with ritual care. Not today. The message is the pause itself. Silence is not emptiness, it is a shaped space. Into it, heat cools and plans soften. Governors step back from the edge. Merchants count again. The king folds his hands and lets the hour lengthen until breath slows. A withheld omen delays blame and redistributes courage. Whoever needed a shove receives a cushion instead. Delay is a kind of rule. When the signs decline to answer, the calendar grows gentle obstacles. Consultations move to a brighter moon. Ceilings postponed until markets calm. Departures nudged to safer wind. No one is scolded, everyone is steered. The city accepts the weather of waiting and calls it prudence. Sometimes silence is purchased by mercy. Priests know that a stark answer would split the room, so they close the book of oil and consult the book of patience. Return at dawn, they say, or let the river decide by Ftma. The verdict hides in the instruction. Sleep, watch, measure. Tomorrow's choice will feel like consent, because tonight refused to rush. Even skeptics recognize the craft. A quick oracle can ignite factions. A quiet one cools the pot. Ambiguity greases the hinge, but silence locks the door softly, letting tempers slide without losing face. By morning, people believe they chose the slower road. Around the bowl, hands lower, the room tilts toward listening, less for words than for the comfort of restraint. Beyond the curtained doorway, the crowd senses the pause and leans inward. The audience holds its breath. Babylon learned to listen by counting. Stars rose like numbers, smoke curled like lines on a ledger. A liver's bright ridge became a note to file. The aim was not magic, but relief. Lesson surprises. Choose calmer hours, move grain before the wind turns rude. Tonight the same hunger glows in quieter rooms. We face panes of light, where constellations have been renamed as metrics, and priests have been replaced by teams with dashboards that hum like temple bees. Charts are our omens. We watch a curve hesitate and whisper about supply. We see a cluster form and think of crowds at a city gate. What were tablets are now tables. What once was a terrace is an operations war room where coffee steams and silence edits plans. The priest's rule still applies. 1 sign excites, to begin to matter. 3 invite action. Redundancy becomes confidence. We seek patterns that repeat without shouting. Extispacy had its clay model to discipline memory. We have baselines and control bands to keep panic from inventing volcanoes in flat fields. A spike asks for a story, but the model answers, gently, wait, was the moon clouded? Was the sample small? Are you seeing weather, or only a passing bird? Even our language echoes the terrace. Signals, noise, smoothing, seasonality. We schedule launches the way caravans once did, avoiding Marzaras no less than we avoid Mondays after holidays. And like the old oracles, numbers keep their ambiguity. They point, they do not push. A dashboard can bless either caution or boldness, depending on who reads the angles and where the lamps are placed. Clarity has a cost. Better sensors, cleaner data, time to sit with the bowl until ripples settle. The economy of answers never closed its doors. Yet humility remains the saving craft. The sky still withholds, the feed still drops. When indicators murmur instead of sing, delay becomes care, and a city, or a company, breathes easier for choosing the slower path. We are not so far from that terrace after all. There is tenderness to knowledge, and a weight that will not be set down. Once you glimpse a bend in the river, their boats become your responsibility. Foreknowledge ties a string to the wrist. Every decision tugs it. Priests learn this ache early. A pattern glows in oil, or a star lingers, and suddenly mercy must be measured, timing rationed, truth carried like a bowl that must not spill. What do you owe the city when the signs lean toward storm? If you speak too soon, panic breeds faster than locusts. If you wait, blame learns your name. Between alarm and hush, the mind builds fences. Tell the king, soften the drumbeat. Widen market hours so bread lasts longer, while no one says why. Concealment is not always a lie. Sometimes it is a blanket over a sleeping child, while fire is put out in the next room. Yet secrecy is a taste that sweetens with use. Gatekeepers learn how silence decorates power. A warning rooted to allies becomes a favor. A delay that spares the treasury also kneels opinion. The ethics bend, quietly. Who gets to know early becomes the game people play in courtyards, and knowledge, like grain, demands locks. Some facts are too sharp for public hands. An omen read as treason, a dream that invites riot, a calculation that empties a quarter of its hope. These are wrapped in linen and placed where only a few keys exist. Those few then carry a colder burden, to tell half-truths that prevent larger lies. To walk home with faces still and sleep broken into careful pieces. They are judged by results no one will see, so we come to the narrow path. Keep order without curdling into manipulation. Tell truth without handing the torch to fear. Even good forecasts bruise if thrown like stones. The terrace teaches discretion paired with duty, clarity tempered by delay, open palms that still guard. We will step closer to the boundary where foresight turns the hand heavier. Night in the storehouses is its own weather, cool as clay. smelling of chaff and smoke. Offerings arrive like small rivers, bowls of barley, coils of silver, jugs breathing the day's sun. Hands lift praise, but ledgers listen. What is given does not sleep. It is gathered, measured, and set walking. A widow brings grain for the god's table. By morning it is part of a loan to a farmer upriver whose field needs seed. A merchant lays silver in a bowl and finds. Later, that caravans bear the god's ribbon and return with tin and dye pledged against that shine. Devotion leaves on bare feet and comes back wearing sandals with interest stitched into the straps. Piety, the city learns, is also velocity. The priests call it stewarding. They bless the jars, kiss the weights, and read the tablet where sums breathe like tame animals. Every gift acquires a task. Barley moves to granaries where cool air schools it into discipline. Silver is braided into advances, a boat repaired, a wall raised, a herd bought before drought leans over the horizon. The god's house is a vault with windows. What enters goes out again in orderly weather. Debts bind without shouting. Repayment happens in harvest hands and market mornings, with measures checked by the gaze that watched the altar flame. If a borrower falters, the calendar leans. A festival remits a portion. The year's 13th month swallows a week of worry. Mercy is policy's softer instrument, and policy travels under incense so softly that few mind its weight. People trust because the cycle keeps time with the sky. Offerings ripen into loans. Loans ripen into storehouses filled enough to answer thin seasons. The god receives worship and returns predictability. That is the bargain. And the city sleeps because it holds. Somewhere beyond the jars, a scribe's lamp warms a square of wet clay. He listens to the room breathe, patient as a tethered boat, and writes the terms that make generosity walk farther than a single night. The reed tilts, pauses, and begins. In the quiet, a stylus marks interest. The ledger does not begin with numbers. It begins with breath. Lamps are trimmed, sleeves tied back, and the room folds itself into attention. A tray of weights rests like sleeping birds. The scribe warms his reed between fingers, as if waking a small instrument. When he speaks, it is not chatter but cadence. The same steady phrases that have carried silver and grain across many seasons without spilling a drop. Names are called, not hurried, and each answers with a bow. Witnesses take their places as quietly as stones. The clerk recites the terms aloud, so that walls and men can remember. Measure, date, purpose, the promise of return. He taps the tablet's edge after each line. A soft drum to keep the vow walking straight. Then the counting beans into a bowl. Weights kissed to balance. Scoops leveled with a breath blown across their tops. Numbers arrive like beads on a string. Nothing hides. The debtor repeats the sum. The creditor repeats the pledge to wait. A priest murmurs a blessing that is also a warning. About honest scales and sleep that will not argue. Seals wait like constellations on a cloth. First the borrower's mark, then the house of the god, then the two witnesses, whose names travel where they do. Each cylinder rolls its story into the clay, spirals of lions and reeds, a river taught to flow along a palm. The act is quiet theater, law braided with beauty, so that memory will want to hold it. When the tablet is lifted, the room exhales together. A copy is made, wrapped in clay, and set aside like a seed kept for leaner years. People rise slower than they sat, as if the ground itself has signed. Debt begins as a bridge and becomes a road you live on. A sack of barley borrowed against a thin harvest, a roof mended before the rains, a bride price advanced each. Kindness ties a knot in the cord that leads back to the temple door. Payments arrive like small tides, and when the moon outruns the purse, the debtor offers labor, then seasons, then names of children pledged to work until the sum can breathe again. The chain is invisible, braided from clay, custom, and the fear of winter. Yet the same hands that tighten it also loosen it. From time to time, mercy walks the streets wearing festival garlands. A trumpet sounds, scribes lift tablets like lanterns. A decree flows through alley and market. Remissions, remittances, debts cooled to ash. Not all, and not forever, but enough to reset a city's shoulders. Crooked accounts are straightened. Fields lost to arrears come home like birds, who remember the old roofline. Jubilee is policy taught to speak in the language of grace. A ruler gains new loyalty by untying knots his ledgers could have tightened. Priests remind the walls that ownership is a story told aloud, and stories can be revised. The amnesty heals before resentment hardens into fracture. Those freed of interests return to their posts with faces lit. Those who forgave are praised in song until their pride tastes sweet. Hope learns the rhythm. People bear the yoke knowing it may lift when drums and stars agree. Between remissions, restraint returns, fewer reckless loans, gentler collection, quieter bargaining at dusk. A city is held by cords and scissors both. On a bright morning, benches fill, birds startle, sandals hush. A steward unrolls his tablet and clears his throat. A proclamation read in the square. Asterisk, granaries sleep like patient animals along the temple's spine. Bellies, square and cool. Inside, the air tastes of straw and quiet thunder. Torches are kept low, voices lower. Every jar is a promise with a mud seal. Every stack a choir of brown moons. People slip in and feel their shoulders drop, as if the future was stored on shelves. Food here equals time. A scoop today becomes 10 mornings next month. Priests move like tides between bins, chalking symbols, testing dryness with a pinch, listening to grain like doctors to chests. They ration not only sacks but seasons, this quarter for planting, that for the lean moon, this for widows, that for soldiers thin from roads. In their ledgers, fate is counted in measures, and hope is weighed before it is spoken. When rumors of drought walk the alleys, these rooms become shrines. Petitioners bring news, not only requests, a stubborn sky, a fickle canal, a merchant late. The answer arrives in measured scoops and printed seals and, in calendars shifted a few days. Rations are rules that feed bellies and tempers. The city eats quietly together. Children are brought to learn what safety smells like. They touch a cool jar and hear a story, of a year when dust sang at the window, of gates kept steady because bins were full and counting honest. Gratitude takes the shape of sweeping floors, mending baskets, standing straight when the tally is read. Even the mice seem to pause, as if the god had trained them in restraint. We mistake power for spears. It often lives in scoops. A scoop rescues a marriage, steadies a quarter, turns fear into patience. Outside, clouds argue with the horizon. Inside, lids settle, cords tighten. Watchmen lean against planks, and the great doors bar against famine. Asterisk, the scales rest on a cedar table. Brass pans breathe lamplight. The beam waits for a story to balance. Around them, stones sleep in cloth standards kept apart, so hands remember privilege. Before any measure, a priest washes, dries, and lifts each piece, naming the weights as if greeting elders. Blessing is not ornament. It is the frame around trust. Merchants step closer, shoulders eased, eyes awake. Everyone watches the pointer settle, because truth must repeat. A barley scoop is leveled with a breath. A pebble is added, then removed, to prove the beam can be tempted and still return to center. In this room, fairness is rehearsed so the market outside can walk straight. Calibration is credibility. The standards are compared to a masterstone sealed in a box with clay seals. The cord is broken only on holy days or when rumors bite. If a pan drifts, it is shaved with strokes until the tongue of the beam speaks cleanly. Children are shown flakes of brass like shed skins. This is how honesty stays young. Blessed weights do not make virtue, but they help it stand. A buyer accepts price because the ritual says, "We checked." A seller bows because the audience saw the beam return. The god's gaze witnesses not the sale, but the care before the first grain fell. 3 words move through Babylon like familiar birds: tithe, tax, tribute. They seem different when spoken at doorways, the first warm with faith, the second stern with law, the third marked with dust, yet all 3 fly toward the same perch. Each coin, each scoop, each fleece joins a single river that curls back to the temple court, where ledgers breathe and decisions find weight. Tithe is the portion you give because the year treated you kindly and you wish to keep that kindness in sight. It moves in festival baskets and bowls, paced by him. Tax comes measured by officials with counting sticks. They prefer receipts to bruises. Tribute arrives with drums, the sound of a long road. Its burden is not only grain but posture. Different paths, one channel. The center tallies streams together and decides the city's weather. repairs for canals, oil for lamps, stipends for singers who keep peace, garrisons fed to be patient. What returns is not always visible. Stability is a payment, so is a calendar that does not lurch. The poor learn which gate gives bread at dusk. The proud learn which months to lower their voices. Names help the heart accept. A faithful man prefers tithes to tax. A conqueror prefers tribute to gift. A clerk prefers all three to arrive on time. The ritual around them softens edge and argument. Bless the basket, count the measure, kiss the seal, and the road under the load feels level. Skilled stewards blend the streams to avoid floods. A levy eased during drought becomes a tithe encouraged at harvest. A tribute reduced by omen returns as a tariff at the gate. The words change hats while the river keeps its course. Gatekeepers learn to smile like saints and count like stewards. At the main doors, devotion is a key that fits most locks. A clean tunic, a small offering. The line moves, and the city believes in fairness. But knots of need collect in the shade, and other keys glitter friend of, cause into. Patronage does not contradict ritual. It nests inside it like a bird in carved stone. A petitioner praised for piety finds his place closer to the window. A widow's letter, endorsed by a singer who calmed a quarrel last month, rises to the top of a neat stack. A caravan guild brings cedar in spring and receives fall appointments at cooler hours. Each favor learns a liturgy. Mention the god, kiss the seal, and ensure the right name crosses the right threshold at the right time. In back rooms, rules are interpreted rather than broken. An exemption is drafted for a family who lent oxen to a procession. A late tithe is accepted because a flood ran hard at their field. Clerks know which phrases to pluck from law like strings that release a door latch. The fiction is tender and persistent. No one jumps the queue. Queues are braided. This weaving keeps tempers quiet. The favored feels seen. The waiting trust the story. The surface stays intact. Power hums like a loom behind the hymn. If you know the pattern, you can breathe easier near the counters. In the quiet clerk's room, law learns to speak like weather. A contract is not finished when the numbers line up. It is finished when the gods are invited to stand beside them. The scribe recites the terms, measures the pledges, and then lowers his voice to the oldest part. If this promise phrase, may the sky remember. The clause unrolls like a slow river. Break the due date, and may your storehouse forget coolness. Change the weights, and may your field lean away from rain. Deny the messenger, and may your doors mistake your face. The language does not shout. It shows pictures the mind cannot refuse. Threshing floors bare as bone, wells turning shy, a name that thins on friendly tongues. Fear becomes carefulness without bruising a single wrist. Witnesses nod, not because they believe storms take orders, but because the images travel farther than guards. A patrol cannot watch every gate. A curse can watch the hour a liar most loves. Even power bows to such theater. Governors who shrugged at fees glance upward before they sign. The ritual has mercy folded in its hem. Restore what was taken, and may the river cool its stare. Feed the widow you ignored, and may your measure regain its honest tongue. Repentance arrives as tasks, not tears, and so contrition repairs the world one scoop at a time. Finally the scribe names, the patrons of the promise, the house of the god, the king's peace, the city's gates. He rolls the cylinder seal across wet clay, lions and reeds leaving their braided road. The tablet warms by the lamp until its skin tightens, until dawn listens from the lintel above. Outside, night turns its patient gears. Inside, compliance rests beneath a glaze of awe, and the contract bakes hard. The first tokens were small and friendly to pockets, baked clay marked with sheep or jars, pieces you could touch and know what they promised. A shepherd slid one across a palm, and a lamb changed owners without a bleat. Grain moved the same way, heavy but honest. You could hear value rustle and smell it breathe. The temple's bins translated praise into safety, and debts were paid in scoops that made a sound like rain kept in bowls. But weight slows trade, and roads ask for lighter dreams. Silver began to stand in for barley. A bright river poured into rings and little moons. You could carry a season on a cord at your waist. The scales learned new grammar. Fairness kept its theater of blessed stones and careful breaths. Yet the pans now held something abstract, not bread itself, but the right to bread. trust stretched to cover the distance. A stamp on a bar, a seal on a bag, a promise that the temple or the palace would honor the shrine. People learned to watch marks as if they were faces. A lion meant the weight would not cheat. A city's crest meant a coin could knock on many doors, welcomed inside. Where grain had guaranteed fullness, silver guaranteed movement. Then tokens returned, thinner and quicker, tallies inked on tablets, entries copied between houses like birds flying in step. A debt no longer needed a bag, it needed a line in the right clay. A scribe, abstraction multiplied reach. A caravan left with empty packs and came home owing a number. The goods counted elsewhere, profit already breathing on a shelf. The habit that held all of this together never changed. Currency is choreographed belief. The city agrees to see a lamb inside a symbol, a harvest inside a circle of light. When enough eyes nod, value hardens. When doubts grow, the same coin feels thin as leaf. Centuries tilt, and the clay learns paper's tongue. We carry promises of fiber and ink. Today's notes stacked like modern tablets, warm from the press and bright with trust. Empires arrive with new gods, but their hands learn old motions. The Persians inherit corridors that already know how feet should sound, and they keep the ledgers breathing while changing the seal at the corner. Royal roads extend the temple's long memory. Couriers replace acolytes, yet the packets they carry are the same weight certified. Names recorded, months named, so caravans move together like schooling fish. Tribute is braided tighter and called empire, but its rhythm is familiar. Offerings into taxes, loans paced by calendars, punishments pictured to teach caution. Asterisk in Greek cities. Accountants sit where priests once sat, speaking the math of trust. A chorus sets the tempo for consent. A torch displays a verdict to those in the last row. Coinage multiplies faces, each profile an oath promising honest weight. The gods change masks, but the choreography holds. Processions, audits, amnesties, all paced so people feel steady inside the story. Rome, practical as a scale, builds basilicas that resemble granaries. Weights and measures become a civic priesthood. Inspectors walk the markets like small deities whose blessing is a stamp. The census gathers lives the way a bin gathers grain. Portioning duties, rationing rights, storing obligations for release. Contracts end with invocations older than the Latin that writes them. Oaths once tied to stars now bind to eagles and the genius of the city. The treasury, windowless, hums with barley's old lesson. Store, schedule, distribute. What the temple taught is not a doctrine but a rhythm, symbol to focus attention, schedule to calm decision, surplus to anchor promise. Keep the beam level and the story persuasive. Punish with images that linger. Forgive on a day with drums. These are administrative rites, and they outlive the deities who first wore them. A storage jar becomes a chest, becomes a vault. A processional way becomes a parade route, a boulevard for coronations and policy. We feel the same tools in different hands, polished by use, seals to signet rings, tablets to paper, omens to indicators. At the horizon, dust rises. New standards snap in wind banners of new rulers over the same vaults. Lanterns drowse along the avenue, and the city rehearses the names of one goddess spoken many ways. Ishtar arrives as morning star and evening reckoning. She carries roses in one hand and thunderheads in the other. Lovers whisper to her threshold. Soldiers clap their hands to wake her favor. Judges straighten their backs when her statue passes. One face promises a soft bed and safe letters. Another face sharpens spears. Plurality is not confusion here. It is reached out in the hymns. She is honey and iron, the kiss and the decree. Priests do not flinch at the turn. They pivot with her. If peace is required, they dress her in river blue and talk of gardens, of belts unknotted and doors unbarred. If borders ache, she walks out blazing, a lion at her heel and a city at her shoulder. The stories contradict only if read alone. Together, they operate like a hinge. Swing toward mercy, swing toward might, never leaving the doorway. Policy borrows this grammar. A levy can be framed as love grain shared so mothers sleep, or as judgmentaries paid to heal the balance. Amnesty arrives as tenderness one year, as discipline the next. I release you because I cherish. Then, I release you because I demand your better work. The same right turns its mask and keeps working. Officials learn to choose which face the moment will obey. People accept the shift because they have practiced it in prayer. A woman who begs for her brother's return brings perfume and also a stern vow. A captain who kneels for luck asks for gentle dreams and clean victories. The goddess teaches the city to hold two truths without tearing. Sweetness makes courage possible. Firmness keeps sweetness from spoiling. Beneath all the faces runs a single current: attention. She collects eyes and moves them where the rulers need them, toward fields in drought or walls in doubt. When her crown tilts toward a choice, the crowd leans with it, trusting the change as a dance, not a lurch. The city learns to breathe in time. At dawn the route is swept with wet brooms, and a thin river of petals marks the first turn. Musicians test a single note until it stands upright in the air. Incense takes the corners before the crowd does, a warm trail that whispers where to look. When the goddess rolls from her doorway, silence settles as if woven, and the first drum persuades feet to remember their part. Procession is instruction written on bodies. Streets become sentences. Pause at the gate, bow by the lion, lift your gaze when the banner clears the shadow of the ziggurat. Even wind seems choreographed, nudged by hidden curtains and clever courtyards that pour coolness into the crush. Children ride shoulders. Elders keep the count with thumbs. Guards move like commas, visible enough to frame, gentle enough to disappear. Sound fastens consent. Horns call a promise, reeds answer with patience, and the pulse thickens without shouting. The rhythm leaves no pockets for quarrel. Smell agrees: myrrh in baked bread, cedar smoke, and river damp, a blend that feels like belonging. Eyes meet and soften. Strangers sway as if remembering a lesson learned in sleep. Along the way, small wonders arrive on time. A dove lifts when the chant reaches its turn. A guttered lamp blooms because someone nudges a shutter. The statue tilts just enough to bless a widow, and her hands discover steadiness. None of this is forced. All of it is arranged. The spell is consent made audible, admiration rehearsed until it becomes peace. At the sacred bend, the crowd loosens content, timed, accounted. Bakers return to ovens with lighter brows. Captains carry the beat back to barracks. The city, newly threaded, exhales. Lanterns blink. Rose petals stick to warm sandals. Cymbals fade to whisper. Night hushes its wings as the rite unfolds, gentle as rain beginning. The goddess and the king meet in symbol, not scandal. A bed prepared with cedar and linen, bowls of figs and milk, a cup that tastes of dates and clean water. Priests sing in a tone that doesn't hurry. The words are old, the promise is young. The union is a bridge the city walks across without fear. What joins here is more than two names. Fields lean to listen. Canals remember their banks. The king offers breath and vow. The goddess offers seed and season. When their stories braid, barley hears permission to rise. Ewes find patience, and ovens believe in mornings. Heirs are not only children, but calendars that keep their pace, treaties that hold in heat, and storehouses that forget how to echo in the hush. Law becomes tender. A pact between neighbors is blessed by the same softness that oils the lamps. When the king signs a treaty after this night, the ink carries pollen. When he stands beside cradles, his hand feels steadier. Authority borrows fertilities, tone less command, more invitation. The people, hearing grain in the syllables, bend toward cooperation without feeling pressed. Skeptics call it theater. The priests nod, theater that feeds. By staging harmony, the rite teaches bodies to rest and work in season. It tethers rule to ripening, not to iron. If the union falters, drought learns the way in. If it thrives, quarrels forget their sharpest words. Night gathers the city into one breath. The drums fall silent, and a hush spreads like cool water over brick and bone. The procession stops before the gate, and the singers trade their bright steps for slow, circling notes. This is the hour of lament, when Ishtar's voice is taught to every throat. Candles blink like tired eyes, faces tilt upward, and grief is invited to sit among us without hurry. A woman begins, naming losses in a melody that feels like walking through rain. The child who did not wake, the field that cracked, the letter that never came home. The crowd answers in low waves, repeating her last line until it softens. Men weep without turning away. Children stare and then sigh, as if understanding requires only permission. Priests bring bowls of water and touch each brow. For a moment, every citizen becomes a temple wall, washed to receive inscriptions of comfort. The goddess mourns in us. Statues cannot cry, so bodies do. We lend her salt and shoulders. She lends us a script for letting go. Sobs organize into cadence, and the city's ache is shared until it weighs less on any single door. When the chant names the dead, it keeps room for the living. When it lists what broke, it also counts what remains: bread, lamps, hands that can still carry. Renewal arrives quietly, disguised as breath. Musicians lift the beat a finger's width. Incense tilts from ash toward flame. People start to picture tomorrow, one small task at a time. Mending a net, sweeping a step, writing to a brother. The priests open the gates and give back the morning voice by voice. We walk home lighter, not because sorrow vanished, but because it found chorus and shape. Not everyone walks the same distance into the goddess's house. Some stop at the porch, happy with hymns and bread. Others pass the incense line and learn how lamps are trimmed, how a procession takes its first breath. A handful go farther, shoes left at the screen. Eyes lowered, initiates taught how a gesture becomes a key. Initiation is a staircase built of questions. At the first landing, a story gains a private verse. At the next, a symbol learns a second name. What looked like ornament becomes instruction. What sounded like poetry turns into a map. Grades of knowing do not scold the outside, they promise a deeper inside. You are trusted with a thread keeping corridors from looping. Belonging takes on texture. A novice memorizes the pattern of knocks to the archive. An adept tastes oil and can tell which riverbend it came from. The city calls it mystery, the initiates call it practice. Each step ties you tighter to hands you count on in the dark. Secrets are less about hiding than about holding. A cup carried by many, steady, because the grip is taut. There are prices, and they are chosen. Vows trim appetite for boasting. Speech slows. Eyes learn when not to shine. Yet the reward hums. Access timed to quiet hours. Early weather of decisions. A place near the curtain when meaning swivels. Asterisk velvet hangs heavy in the dressing court, and the air smells of cedar and fire. Power puts on its face, one clasp at a time. A crown waits on wood, not loud, bright enough to teach attention. Beside it, a coil of rosette pins catches the lamplight like suns, trained to move where command asks. Linen, wool, hammered gold, the fabrics rehearse posture before the body arrives. Each piece is a sentence. A fillet means custody of peace. A high, Felian-shouldered mantle suggests a back made for burdens no shawl could carry. Lions prow along borders, stitched in gold thread, their paws stepping the rhythm the city keeps. The wearer does not merely look fierce, he borrows the lion's grammar, forward, watchful, unafraid to stand where roads meet. Rank is read at a glance. Rosettes thicken near the collar for counselors. Fewer blooms mark envoys who carry permission but not verdict. The number of tassels is a calendar of access. Sandals dyed river blue tell doors to open without knock. Even the silence of plain cloth speaks. Penitence today, thunder tomorrow. A costume edits the room before the first word is spent. Women of office dress decisions in beauty. A net of lapis settles like cool rain at the throat. A lion-headed comb tames hair the way law tames rumor. Bracelets chime the pace of audiences. Veils lift like signatures, slow enough to make memory obey. Attendants study the wearer for a slant undone. A clasp too tight, because the city reads errors for omens. Clothes must hold the mind steady, neither drunk on glitter nor starved of it. In this theater, fabric is a gentle weapon, a promise, a leash made fragrant. They choose the bearer when shadows can be persuaded to change. He is washed, dressed in plain linen, and marked with signs. A thread of red, a sprig of rivergrass, a smear of ash. The city gathers its ache into him without touching. Names of quarrels are whispered toward his shoulders. Worries are folded like notes and slipped into the silence around his steps. Drums do not hurry, they keep the heart steady. He walks a path few study until it is needed. Past the line at the gate, along the wall where ivy fingers brick, through a market that keeps still. Priests list the year's heaviness, failed calves, fevered rooms, a captain's rashness, a crop that would not agree with rain. Each word is a stone placed in a basket no one sees. The bearer bows at intervals, as if the load shifts. Relief arrives early. Before the gates, light as a rumor. People breathe easier because someone carries what they could not name. Yet a seam of unease stitches itself. What is taken away may also be forgotten, and forgetting can hide a lesson that should remain. The ritual comforts, and it edits. At the final arch, cords loosen. The bearer steps beyond the threshold to the road that pretends to be endless. He will vanish into a sentence the city repeats, "Gone for our sake." Behind him, faces tilt upward. Bread tastes brighter. Quarrels look smaller. Power in Ishtar's house moves like a dancer changing steps without losing the beat. Roles are levers, not cages. A priestess can quiet a riot with a cup of water and a smile measured to the inch. The same woman can still the court with a sentence clipped to the bone. A general, taught to roar, learns when softness saves troops and treasure. Gentle and fierce are masks on the same hook, worn by weather, not essence. The city watches and imitates. When the goddess wears love, governors frame decrees as comfort taxes, as shared blankets, repairs as counseling for streets and canals. When she turns warward, the tone tightens. The same duty becomes a shield, the same levy a wall. Both faces point to the same gate, but paths taken by hearts differ. One invites, one insists. Both deliver obedience that feels chosen. Households rehearse the lesson. Market mothers bargain like diplomats at dawn, then judge like captains by noon. Boys taught spear forms also carry babies, while bread rises, practicing command that cares. Men kneel to receive river blessings from grandmothers who remember dry years, and leave with orders that sound like lullabies. Authority borrows timbre from whoever can steady breath. Costume helps, but posture does the work. Veils soften angles so truths can land. Lion combs stiffen spines so kindness does not melt into waste. The trick is timing. Yield before a crowd bends into panic. Harden before delay breeds rot. Priests teach this like meter, tapping fingers to show where a sentence should turn. None of this dissolves difference. It redeploys it. Femininity is allowed teeth. Masculinity learns to be a bowl. People judge leaders by range, not volume. Those who cannot switch masks misread the hour. She changes names, not habits. In one city she is Inanna, all thresholds and thunder. In another she is Ishtar, walking between market and battlefield, with the same measured stride. Across the sea she becomes Astarte, then later Aphrodite, then Venus bright on calendars and coins. Wherever the morning star rises, people relearn the grammar, desire braided to decision, beauty with a blade tucked in the hem, mercy that knows how to stand its ground. Her animals keep pace with her passports. Lions pad along stone and silk. Doves wheel over terraces and ships. The rosette blooms on combs, diadems, and flags, as if the flower taught memory to travel. A hand lifted in blessing learns to command without shouting. A veil that once promised rain later promises law. Cities swap languages, yet the same props keep appearing. Mirror, girdle, standard, star. The plays rewrite themselves but keep the plot. Processions shift from brick avenues to marble colonnades. Hymns become odes. Choruses brighten with theater masks and seashells. Priests turn into magistrates, then into patrons of games. Sacred marriage becomes pageant, then wedding of crown and city. Love tends harvests. War disciplines borders. Both speak with one mouth when stability asks. The goddess teaches technique, more than theology. Stories travel secretly. To court painters nest doves near helmets. Philosophers rename desire as harmony and give it civic tasks. Even later, saints gather roses and stand on crescent moons, softening steel with radiance. On public squares, allegories of liberty and victory borrow her posture. They invite and command in the same breath. Each new name trims yesterday's thorns and grows today's flowers. Some eras prefer silk, others bronze. Either way, the pattern survives. Spectacle gathers consent. Time blesses policy. Surplus buys devotion. And a woman-faced emblem conducts the orchestra. She is not one person. She is a method with a pulse. Follow her star across maps, and you will find the old levers under fresh paint, turning as quietly as ever. Night slips its ribbon through the city, and ties a quiet bow. The stage does not sleep. Once a procession finds its rhythm, the streets remember, and memory behaves like scaffolding that cannot be folded. The goddess may change her mask. The actors rotate. The script returns, patient as the river. Banners learn new emblems, drums new signatures, but the cadence beneath paint is the same sentence, walking. Rome inherits avenues built for wonder and widens them. Eagles replaced lions. Triumphal carts learn the turns rehearsed by sacred litters. Standards ripple like hymns taught fresh words. Crowds practice awe on schedule. Laurels lifted, right hands risen, incense traded for brass. The theater trains order to feel natural, and law steps wearing perfume you cannot name. Byzantium perfumes the inheritance with gold. Processions become mosaics that move, floor to dome again. Emperors glide as if pulled by the same invisible cords that once steadied statues. Curtains blossom, icons lean, and candles copy stars. A city can live inside an image if the image repeats. Breath eases when the pattern returns them to shore. Centuries tilt. Modern capitals trade altars for arches and streets for screens. Parades drill the steps into muscles. Anthems tutor breath. Fireworks teach the eye to agree. Cameras learn the priest's art of framing one angle for tenderness, one for strength. Elections, inaugurations, funerals, the costume changes, the choreography stays. Even absence is staged, a moment of silence cupped like water. We do not escape theater, we refine it. Ritual survives because it fits the body and edits fear. Attention is summoned, timed, and released like doves. Schedules bless decisions. Surplus buys the backdrop. Symbols keep the lamp wicks trimmed. The audience grows, the stage widens, yet the levers remain reachable by anyone who knows where to stand and how to turn. They arrived not as bonfires, but as hands with keys. The Persians stood in the cool of the temple vaults and did not blow out the lamps. They trimmed the wicks. Priests watched them the way cats watch new masters of an old courtyard lurk. The conqueror spoke another tongue, wore other crests, but they listened to the hum inside the storage jars and nodded as men who recognized a good engine by its steady breath. Continuity became policy. Local gods kept their houses. Processions kept their turns. The new satraps counted with the old stones, because grain does not learn foreign grammar overnight. Offerings still flowed into jars, and jars into loans, and loans into calmer markets. A banner changed on the gate, and inside, the scales kept their honest theater. The Persians preferred their tribute warm with consent, and consent sleeps best when rituals survive. They brought roads and riders to quicken the math. Messages ran in relays faster than rumors. Appointments landed on exact mornings. Audits arrived like mild weather, regular and hard to resent. Where the lion had ruled the wall, an eagle watched. Where Ishtar's star had guided lanes, a royal seal assured safe passage. Yet the priest's hand still leveled the scoop, and the scribe still tapped the tablet's edge between lines to keep the vow walking straight. Toleration was not romance, it was architecture. A tolerant roof keeps taxes dry. Let the locals sing their hymns. The logic went, and they will bring their measures on time. In return, the empire offered broad peace, mended canals, and a calendar that did not lurch. The bargain required quiet, no smashed altars, no sudden waits, no new moons forced into the week. The Persians owned the horizon and rented the hearth. In courtyards. People practiced saying two names for the same gate, two prayers for the same harvest. The god received incense, the king received dues. The ledgers married them without jealousy. The empire did not need to erase what worked. It needed to stand where the current already flowed and call it order. Knowledge rarely stays where it was born. It prefers a road, a pack, a companion. When borders shift, people move, and their methods step quietly beside them. A potter leaves a kill secret in his lungs and shows it with his hands in a new town. A healer wraps seeds in linen. A scribe learns a different king's name but keeps the neat columns that make promises stand straight. Diasporas carry habits the way trees carry rings. Exiles take calendars, counting moons until the heart steadies. Refugees hold songs that double as inventories. Merchants remember which star rises before safe crossings. In one market, a weaver hears a tune about measuring warp by thumb widths, and finds her loom behaving like a loom from a city unseen. The past does not vanish, it migrates and makes friends. Astronomers are especially portable. Give them a flat roof, 3 chords, and a water clock, and they rebuild the night's grammar. They teach innkeepers to time bread by Venus and farmers to read the argument between planets for planting. In return, they collect wind names, river moods, and rumors of eclipses from travelers, adding to a book the size of sky. The archive walks in sandals. Craftspeople spread quieter empires. Standard weights in saddlebags keep markets honest. Physicians compare fevers as dyers compare hues, and a remedy born in one river town learns the taste of many wells. Letters change alphabets. Reckoning keeps its pulse. Where caravans rest, ideas swap blankets. What rulers conquer, wanderers connect. Step by step, methods hitch rides on memories, stitched into marriages and apprenticeships, translated by need. Far from the first temple, levers lift new roofs, and strangers discover they understand each other by looking up. Greeks arrived with questions like lamps, and rooms brightened wherever they paused. Temples felt new attention. Markets heard fresh comparisons. Instead of scraping old names from stones, scholars practiced weaving. Ishtar conversed with Aphrodite. Marduk nodded toward Zeus. Scribes tested equivalences the way sailors test knots. Syncretism kept stories breathing while ideas traded shoes. Curiosity became shelter. In Alexandria and on islands nearer dust and cedar, libraries opened their mouths wide. Translators sat between alphabets, catching meanings before they fell. Omen turned into sin, tablet into treatise, fate into nature. But the procedures survived. Measure, repeat, compare. The words shifted robes. The steps kept time. Where oil once sketched circles in a bowl, geometry drew arcs and chords. Where livers taught attention to texture, physicians taught prognosis from pulse and color. The algorithms remained, wearing Greek sandals. Philosophers loved the sky's archive. They catalogued risings, coined terms for wandering stars, asked what mechanism hid beneath ritual. Some shaved away incense and left the counts. Others kept hymns as mnemonics because memory likes music. A priest became an observer, a keeper of temples, an administrator. But the ledgers and schedules behaved as before, only annotated with proofs. Trade carried this tolerance. A ship's manifest looked like a temple ledger with salt. Port officials kissed scales with the same reverence as market priests. Standards kept reputations buoyant across capes. Harmony, the Greeks said, and they meant both lyre and law. Tuned strings, tuned streets. Marble widens the avenue, but the choreography is old. Rome learns the trick of turning streets into sentences, and crowds supply grammar. A trumpet lifts the day by shoulders. Laurel crowns glint like suns. The triumph moves, and the city moves with it, breathing in loops for him. Arch, Hilich turned a polished command. Captives, wagons, standards, a parade of proofs teaching belief with rhythm rather than argument. Calendars keep the music steady. Months are named, then tuned. Market days march in even files. A priest reads the sky and chalks a letter on the tablets. Go, or wait while builders and bankers set their tempo to that mark. Nothing here is called omen loudly, yet augurs ascend their hills. Watching birds and winds, so roads do not fill at the wrong hour. Scheduling, given marble steps and beaks, becomes a civic virtue. Bread and games are not a bribe, they are glue. Thousands eat together at the empire's table, knowing who sits where by the placement of awnings and the order of courses. The arena turns danger into lesson. Discipline wins. Waste is punished by spectacle itself. Eyes learn to applaud timing as much as triumph. Behind the glitter, clerks sharpen the quills of control. Taxes flow by timetables. Censuses file living into neat columns. Weights are kissed by officials, whose blessing is a stamp instead of incense. Mercy has its festival days. Remissions walk out of treasury like cool air, and loyalty follows their wake. Rome scales up what Babylon rehearsed. Symbols teach attention. Schedules calm decision. Surplus buys patience. The city feels inevitable, because the ritual never drops the beat. Marble only thickens the echo. Evening leans across the arches. Drums soften to hooves. Dust becomes rose. Standards ripple as if air remembers gods. Along the processional way, eagle banners dipped off law keeps the cadence of old incantations. In the basilica's hush, a magistrate speaks formulas worn smooth by use, and the room obeys. Where priests once invoked stars and rivers, clerks invoked the people, the Senate, the crown. The witness list replaces the pantheon. The statute replaces the hymn. Yet the structure is familiar. Name the promise. Bind it. Picture the harm if it frays, and offer a road back. An oath stands where sacrifice stood. Sworn hands rise, not toward altars, but toward the book. Perjury calls no lightning, but it summons penalties like weather. Property thins, rights narrow, and name grows small in the registry. The curse has new diction, not new bones. Contracts keep the old theater. Parties recite, repeat, inscribe. A clerk taps each clause. Marks and seals press futures into sheets, as cylinders once rolled lions through clay. Remedies read like rituals: restore, repay, abstain for a season, appear on the appointed day. Even mercy keeps choreography suspended. Pardons granted on holidays, so the body politic can breathe together. Judges turn ambiguity into writing opinions that can swing both ways without breaking the door. Enforcement walks in uniform instead of incense. Yet its authority still glows with imagined consequence. Behave, or the city's hands will rearrange your hours, so the spell survives in daylight, wearing prose. Rights are named, risks pictured, duties staged and witnessed. The wax warms above a lamp. Ribbons align, signatures lean forward. Somewhere along the bench, wax seals melt slowly. Public life grows louder under empire. Private rooms grow deeper, behind markets and courts. Small doors open into stairwells that smell of oil and stone. There, mystery schools keep older rhythms alive, not as defiance, but as storage. Knowledge, like grain, needs sealed jars and cool air. Initiates knock in patterns, greet guardians by names that sound like passwords and lullabies. Inside, candles teach shadows to keep secrets. Grades of learning stack like terraces. Novices receive stories with tender edges. A god descends, a god returns. A seed sleeps, a seed awakens. At the next landing, meanings thicken, ritual becomes instruction, myth becomes map. Reenactments practice the moves that keep communities steady when public rights thin or tilt. A chorus is trained, a silence tuned, a gesture timed to open a room without a key. These schools do not hoard, they curate. A formula that once bound a contract now binds the conscience. A calendar for planting becomes a calendar for fasting and generosity. Symbols are made portable: wheat sheaf, lamp, ring. Members carry them into ordinary days so that markets feel less lonely and laws less cold. The mysteries shelter nuance when headlines shout. Passwords are not mere fences, they are sutures between strangers. Knowing the phrase that turns a meeting into fellowship rescues evenings from waste. Above all, repetition is loved. The same story told until it holds. The same path walked until feet make it smooth for the next dot. When rulers change costumes, these inner rooms keep the body's memory of ritual intact. Techniques survive, ready to serve mercy or order as the season demands. Outside, a parade or an edict. Inside, measured breath and a lamp protected from drafts. A mentor leans close, smiles with the calm of someone guarding a good library. In the warm dim, a ring is passed pom to pom. Courts learn to keep a room for the sky. Not a chapellan office with charts rolled like maps and water clocks ticking modestly. Advisors stood between windows and calendars, speaking in the unhurried tone used for weather. They did not sell destiny, they rented prudence. A king asked about spring roads, and the astrologer answered with angles, not thunder. Venus climbing favors treaties. Mars low asks for patience with steel. The court relaxed because caution had a name. Asterisk files grew fat with pairings. Bright Jupiter beside full granaries. Thin moon near border skirmishes. Stubborn Saturn shadowing failed bridges. Patterns were not orders, they were tides listed by hour. The bureau's craft was timing. Begin under this sky, wait under that one. Even skeptics listened. If campaigns launched when the city slept easily, supply lines behaved, and praise traveled faster. Asterisk, memoranda brought the heavens down to tables. Sign ease contracts after the third lamp. One note advised, move the levy 2 days forward. The market will breathe. Governors adopted the accent. They learned to say, not fate, but window, not omen, but signal. Blame thinned when decisions matched the sky's tempo. Success, when it came, felt earned, and also accompanied. Courtiers discovered that astronomy made politics quieter. When meetings were scheduled by stars, fewer voices argued with the clock. When a day was marked unlucky, mercy gained room to operate without apology. The method soothed nerves and smoothed rivalries. The ruler looked wiser for choosing to hear it. Maps rustled, lamps steadied, and a courier's sandals cooled on stone. Outside hooves faded toward the north. Inside, the recommendations settled like dusk. A general delays a march. Libraries breathe like careful animals, ribs of shelves rising and falling with readers' hands. In rooms that smell of paste and dusted leather, scribes copy the world into narrower lines, hoping speed can outrun accident. Lamps are trimmed, sand is kept ready to drink a blot before it spreads. Each book is a raft built for a river that someday will swell. Each copy is a wager that memory can be taught to swim. Across centuries, the race is patient and panicked at once. A monastery counts winters by the thickness of its psalms. A court measures favor by the number of star tables it owns. Somewhere else, a spark finds a curtain, and years melt in an afternoon. Afterward, Shah is sorted like bones. Surviving volumes grow heavier with meaning because their siblings are gone. What remains becomes not only reference, but relic. Loss and care learn to walk together. Catalogues sprout cross-references like vines, so if one wall falls, another will lead you home. Translators make bridges between alphabets. Merchants smuggle manuscripts rolled inside carpets. Mothers teach sons to memorize lists in case roofs redden. Fire invents new professions. Restorers who breathe onto curling pages. Binders who stitch wounds into spines. Couriers who sleep with parcels under their ribs. The work changes shape, but not intention. Clay turns to parchment, parchment to paper, paper to light. And still the copying continues, backup upon backup, a humility that refuses to trust luck. Scribes name themselves in tiny letters, not for pride, but so a future hand can find them and keep the chain unbroken. Even the errors are rescued. A margin note travels farther than its sentence because it remembers the human who leaned there. Altars cooled. But the profession of keeping faith did not retire. Where smoke once braided upward, counters and tall stools appeared, and a new priesthood learned to bless with ink. The banker's bench inherited the temple's hush, weights wrapped in cloth. A master scale kissed each morning, ledgers opened like modest doors. Supplicants arrived with hopes balanced on collateral rather than lambs. The ritual changed costume, not intent. A vow still needed witnesses, a date, a seal, and a picture of what would happen if the promise broke. Incense became sand on wet ink. The room believed because the room behaved. Deposits were offerings with interest. Cities pooled silver the way granaries pooled grain against lean weather, against rash seasons, against the tremor of rumor. Behind the counter, clerks practiced liturgy disguised as arithmetic, recitation of accounts, antiphonal checking of sums, a doxology of signatures aligned along the page. Coins lay where votives had rested, and receipts traveled. Like blessed slips one could present at distant doors to be made whole. Credit turned sacrifice into schedule. Instead of burning value to court favor, borrowers pledged future mornings, and bankers timed their release. A loan funded a bridge. The bridge commanded tolls. The tolls refilled the vault. The vault extended new mercy, measured in months. Rulers learned to speak in terms once reserved for gods. Confidence, providence, grace, periods. Trust became an empire's breath. The rites were familiar to anyone raised near a sanctuary. Audits replaced festivals as communal reassurance. Jubilee continued as remissions and restructurings, announced with careful fanfare so markets unclenched together. Curse clauses migrated into penalties and liens, blessings into guarantees and insurance. Even the architecture remembered, counters like altars, niches for patron saints of risk. Back rooms where silence did the heavy lifting. What mattered most was choreography. A crowd must see fairness rehearse itself. Scales tested, books balanced, disputes resolved in tones that cooled the room. When this theater ran smoothly, armies could be paid, roads repaired, granaries stocked, and faith in tomorrow sold at tolerable rates. When it stumbled, banners mattered less than whispers, and borders felt suddenly thin. Empires pass, but procedures rarely die. They molt. In the West, old leavers walked under new banners and took communion with fresh myths. Procession became parade and pilgrimage. The same cadence teaching streets when to hush and when to sing. Ledgers slipped into script. Monks recited accounts as psalms of stewardship, and a clean column felt like grace. Oaths moved from starlit terraces to sanctuaries where relics gleamed. The curse clause turned penance, fine, and exile into weather administered by canon law. A bishop's ring sealed what a cylinder once wrote, and the crowd recognized the choreography witnesses, vows, signatures that held. Astrology learned Latin and wore the modest shawl of natural philosophy. Scholars timed cures and counsels by sky's etiquette, careful to call it prudence rather than fate. Libraries taught memory to kneel. Catalogues, indexes, glosses, systems that let books summon each other, like cousins at harvest. In counting houses, merchants rehearsed saintly arithmetic. In courts, notaries staged miracles of exactness, where lives were converted into lines and returned intact. The occult endured as the back room of policy. Hidden schools braided Pythagoras to Moses, Hermes to Solomon, storing algorithms under allegory, correspondences, balances, hours that would agree to do heavier lifting. Princes listened because timing softened risk. Guilds listened because symbols kept strangers honest. Everywhere the triad worked, symbol to gather, schedule to soothe, surplus to anchor, and the West called it tradition, custom. Providence. Renaissance rooms brightened, and the old wires hummed. Pageants framed reform as revelation. Masks taught obedience with velvet hands. Bankers blessed ventures with contracts that unfolded like liturgies. Printers multiplied tablets into pamphlets, coaching the street with portable rites, petitions, manifestos, almanacs of auspicious days. Even skepticism performed. Academies elected, minutes recorded, emblems crowned their seals. The pattern was the message: attention, timing, reserve. What changed was the pantheon, not the instruments. Saints replaced idols, charters replaced oracles, calculation replaced trance. Yet desire for sanctioned wonder persisted, a whisper that order needs a little theater to be loved. We will follow those corridors, the bureaus that prayed, the altars that counted, the archives that dreamed, and watch the tools Babylon tuned play in new keys. Morning arrives like a modest steward, and the monastery wakes to measured kindness. A bell finds the air and shapes it into hours. Stone corridors collect the sound and release it in gentle waves. Sleep folds, robes tie, sandals remember yesterday's path. Time here is not a chase. It is a garden with paths trimmed and named, where the day walks without stumbling. Prime, terse, sext, none beads on a strand. The brothers move through them the way farmers cross fields by landmarks. Well, oak, wall, gate, fasts and feasts switch the colors of the hours, softening appetite one week, sweetening it the next, so the heart never forgets scale. Even silence has schedule. A novice lowers his voice because the bell asked, not because anyone glared. Keeping time is keeping peace. The abbot reads the lunar tables as a captain reads wind, fixing Easter, spacing vigils, making sure hunger and celebration do not collide like carts in a narrow lane. A water clock blinks. Later, await and escapement teach shadows to march across the courtyard dial. The world outside may lurch. Inside, the calendar moves with a calm hand. Administration wears a cowl. Inventories are counted to psalms. Cellars become stanzas of grain and ale. Guests arrive to a welcome rehearsed by seasons. The bell is a mild governor, redistributing labor with music. Fields now, copying soon. Bread then prayer. No order feels arbitrary because each order has a note, and memory hums along. The same discipline that binds the hours binds temper, debt, rumor. Clocks re-enthrone order with every ring. Asterisk, the city listens from beyond the walls. Market days align with saints. Councils choose the bright mornings the bell favors. Marriages gather at vespers because twilight flatters promises. What began as devotion becomes logistics, and logistics begins to look like mercy. Dusk drifts in, violet as a bruise healing. Another bell needs the light. Quills are lifted. Candles inhale. A page waits for its quiet cargo. The hallway cools into attentiveness, and the steps toward the writing room learn softness for the brothers at their desks. Scriptorium hush. Once, a village hedge was protected by a rhyme and a pinch of salt. A field was promised safe passage by a circle drawn with a knife. People liked their assurances sung. The Middle Ages did not throw those forms away. They taught them Latin, trimmed the feathers, and lined them up on parchment like behaved geese. A blessing that began "May no harm approach" returned as "Know the present and future," and the spell learned manners enough to pass in court. Clerks became conjurers of order. They stacked phrases in repeating towers, whereas, therefore, hereafter each brick mortared by witness and seal. What once called angels, now called sheriffs. The rhythm stayed. Name the boundary, invoke authority, define the penalty, offer the cure, charm into charter. Oaths kept their cadence even as their saints turned to sovereigns and corporations. Listen closely and you can still hear the old lilts humming under the prose like a drone. Beneath a hymn. Boilerplate grew from folk wisdom with its hair combed. Let the thief's hand wither softened into under pain of forfeiture. Let the river bear witness became in the presence of our notary and these men of good repute. A ring once kissed became a wax seal impressed. A circle of power turned signature. Even the flourish at the end, Damon found a cousin in witness whereof, followed by a list of names lined like candles. People trusted what felt familiar. Documents carried protection the way charms once did, hung in chests, read aloud at thresholds, produced when tempers rose. The law learned to soothe with repetition, to warn with pictures painted in ink instead of smoke. Somewhere, a scribe grins, knowing he has domesticated thunder into clauses polite enough for market day. Roads learn prayers. They also learn prices. When pilgrims lace their shoes and follow scallop shells or painted stars, towns wake earlier, lanterns bloom, hostiles add pallets, stew pots grow generous, and menders sit by gates. Devotion arrives with appetite and sore feet. Trade quietly shakes its hand. Shrines teach logistics. A famous relic is a tide table for merchants. Festival weeks promise full purses. Lean months suggest repairs. Cheese travels wrapped in leaves. Candles are braided by the hundred. Ribbons, the color of saints' mantles, flutter from booth to booth. Money changers hum, translating flour to honey, turning distant coins into the local tongue. Blessing becomes a business model, and nobody blushes. Priors rent stalls. Bailiffs sweep quarrels to the edge of the square, and constables time crowds, so pockets feel safe. A singer sells verses that double as maps. A painter offers small panels of the road ahead, with clouds parted. Souvenirs do not cheapen faith. They pin it to memory like a sprig of rosemary that keeps its scent for years. Pilgrims earn and spend stories. A baker along the route learns recipes from 6 provinces. A smith hears about a safer rivet. A widow finds partners for a mill she could not lift alone. When travelers kneel, the town's ledger bows too, then stands refreshed. The journey sanctifies exchange. Alms rise, cups refill, and futures are quietly underwritten by beds and bread. The hall smells of rushes and rain. Benches creak. Wool sleeves hush against wood. When the judge lifts his hand, the room steadies into a listening bowl. Justice arrives here as theater learned from altars. Oaths in the name of saints. Relics raised for eyes to rest upon. Formulas recited until breath slows. Truth is not hunted. It is staged and invited to show its face. A woman swears beside a reliquary bright with fragments of bone. Her palm trembles, but the words land cleanly, syllables lined like candles. If she lies, the curse is written in law rather than fire, yet the room still feels watched. Friends step forward as compurgators, laying their hands lightly and repeating after the clerk. 10 mouths lend her one reputation. Belief ties them together like cords over a chest. Some days the old ordeals return in softened form. A bar of iron cools beside the brazier while prayers are murmured. Wounds will be inspected 3 days hence for divine drift. Or a bound arm slides into a tub and must return light as truth. The logic is not cruelty. It is a public agreement about risk and outcome, a way to let verdicts land without splintering the floorboards beneath them. If the hand heals, the town breathes. If it blackens, guilt is a weather no one needs to shout. Elsewhere, words are not enough. 2 men stand in a ring while silence thickens. Trial by combat is doom wrapped in ceremony. Yet even here the rules are a net. Matched weapons, measured ground, a church bell counting rounds. The loser accepts fate because the script left him a door he agreed to walk through. In the reading room, lamps pool like small ponds, and books do not wander. Each volume wears a chain, a reminder that knowledge keeps hours and guardians. The links sing when a folio is drawn across the lectern. A hush follows that teaches posture. A beadle watches the door, weighing faces against memory. Entry is a privilege recited, not a right. Requests behave like prayers. You copy a title from the catalogue, fold the slip, and present it. A clerk vanishes among spines, and returns with the book on a board, chain clipped, seal inspected. Your bench is a pew. Your task, liturgy, turn to many pages too quickly, and the chain tightens with a murmur. No theft is accused, only haste corrected. Restriction wears velvet names, preservation, order, the common good. Yet the doorway knows another truth. Access arranges power. Those who hold the keys also hold tomorrow's footnotes, deciding which facts may speak aloud. A patron's letter moves you up the queue. A rival's request sleeps until the thaw. Even marginalia are gated. You may copy, but not the part that leans into policy. Not all keepers are cold. One points to a page where a monk's doodle hides proof that joy survived the rules. Another whispers how the index works. A small rebellion. Gratitude mixes with doubt. Chains protect, and they teach the neck to bow. They said the books were newly found, but they felt like mirrors carried out of deep water. Scholars gathered by candle and window, weighing letters that promised a key. As above, so below and inside. Pages spoke of sympathies, binding star to herb, metal to mood, gesture to weather. Not superstition, the readers insisted, but correspondence. A grammar the old world knew and we forgot to speak. The air around desks grew careful, as if a match had hovered near oil. Princes heard and sent for learned men who could time decisions with the sky and polish symbols until they sang. A courtier watched a planet rise before presenting a petition. A treasurer scheduled loans to fatten under certain bright angles. Rulers courted magi not to summon storms, but to find the hour when courage cost least. The promise was subtle. Unlock the harmonies, and rule would feel like music rather than iron. Workshops echoed the zeal. Goldsmiths traced sacred geometry on chalices. Architects folded proportions into churches so stillness would gather in the nave. Physicians brewed gentle metals into tonics on nights that taught them patience. Even the printer's shop hummed with talismanic order letters set in balanced lines so thoughts would travel intact. Everywhere, the new old manuals offered a lens. Align things and they hold together. Doubt was not banished. It was harnessed. Trials were proposed. Mixtures adjusted. Charts corrected after failures. Some claims curled to ash. Others burned clean. Yet the mood stayed luminous. A belief that reality welcomed careful hands. Secrets, once hoarded in cloisters, walked the city in velvet and ink. Saluting both altar and academy. Asterisk banners learn the names of countries, and streets rehearse new choruses. Cathedrals and palaces become stages where a people studies itself in costume. A crown touches a brow and the map steadies. Oaths ripple outward along balconies and bells. Colors are chosen like law's blues for seas, reds for courage kept at borders, white for vows unbloody. Heralds paint beasts that stand for virtues a nation hopes to remember. Coats of arms multiply into flags, seals, and coins. A family of signs teaching eyes where loyalty should rest. Processions stop beneath arches copying triumphs, but tuned for citizens instead of emperors. Guild banners kneeled to royal standards. Students lift laurel and book. The baker's van carries a wheat sheaf that feels like policy you can eat. Music schools breath into the pageant until breath returns steadier to households. Ceremony edits nerves. Coronations instruct crowds to exhale on cue. Parliaments inherit benches arranged for persuasion that looks like order. When envoys arrive, choreography catches them like a net and guides them past thresholds with dignity. That oils negotiation. Even mourning becomes a lesson. Black crepe along avenues. Measured drums, a silence large enough to fit disagreement without breaking it. These rites are not ornaments. They are rails that keep politics moving without derailing hope. Children memorize emblems before alphabets. Adults find their arguments softened by shared melodies and recurring colors. The theater enlarges belonging until policy can sit down inside it and be heard. Lamps rise along the boulevard. Brass cools, and trumpets fade. Doors that look like offices open into rooms that remember temples. Carpets hush shoes, portraits watch with patience. The lodge greets newcomers as a charity with minutes and bylaws. And it is. Blankets delivered, scholarships awarded, hospitals funded by picnics and raffles. Yet beneath the civic smile, a second architecture waits, the staircase of degrees. Grip and step, coded flowers that point to older gardens. Initiation becomes corporate without losing its hush. Candidates learn by doing, knocks that map a building, emblems that file ideas into drawers, oaths that promise privacy. The first degree steadies posture, the next arranges memory. Later ones lend a lens for weighing rumor and duty. Titles sound quaint to outsiders. Inside, they organize temperament like shelves. Meetings read like boardrooms that chose candles. An agenda keeps time, yet the gavel echoes a bell. A lecture about charity folds into a demonstration of how symbols compress instruction. Square and compass, column and arch, eye and liderniemonics, you can carry to work. The lodge teaches persuasion as choreography, where to stand, when to offer silence, which story fits the hour. Its pageantry, tidy and benevolent, keeps ambition from tearing fabric by giving it ritual seams. Philanthropy is the public face that earns trust. The inner work is more domestic, temper moderated, appetite delayed, speech guided by pace and sign. Networks are born, yes, but they come with mirrors. You rise by learning to hold a room without squeezing it. Some chapters grow smoky, tangled with politics. Some stay simple: supper, toast, a small fund for widows. In either case, the framework travels well. Degrees replicate like molds, guiding strangers into fellowship without breaking edges. Outside, street lamps puddle light across wet cobbles. Inside, wicks are trimmed and hands are steadied for tomorrow's work. The door closes softly. Passwords in candlelight. Gold once taught money how to behave. Heavy, bright, resistant to wishful thinking. Then paper learned to imitate those virtues, wearing seals and signatures as if they were alloys. Bankers became alchemists of trust, transmuting deposits into loans, turning risk into yield, and back again with the care of a furnace tender. The chamber changed from crucible to counting room. But the goal stayed: make value travel without losing its shine. Charters replaced grimoire. A note promised to pay the bearer, a spell written in legal ink. Convertibility was the old philosopher's stone. Touch paper to vault, and it flashed into metal. Touch metal to ledger, and it flowed into script. People tested the magic, politely presenting notes, weighing coins, watching tellers work scales like tongs. When confidence held, paper moved like quick gold. When it cracked, the metal spoke louder, and the room chilled. Rituals stabilized the brew. Audits served as purifications, reserves as salts, keeping solution clear. Interest was heat, too low, and mold crept in. Too high, and vessels cracked. Central banks learned to stir the pot with circulars and open market ladles, adding or removing liquidity the way an adept adds drops to Coke's color. Crisis arrived, black and smoky, and balance sheets turned to negro. Then policies whitened the mixture, and growth returned with cautious color. Securities took on shapes alchemists would recognize. Base loans alloyed into tranches with finer names. Risk distilled, bottled, sold. Some elixirs soothed markets, others burned throats and taught humility. Yet always the deepest transformation was psychological. Confidence animated dead paper, made symbols barter like grain. When crowds believed, promises hardened. When doubt blew cold, even gold felt lighter. The metaphors trained behavior. Bankers spoke of sterilizing flows, sterilizing like of sterilized interventions, cleansed of side effects. Accounts balanced to the penny, behaved like balanced equations. Even bubbles carried alchemy's warning. Brilliance without base leads glass to shatter in modern vaults. Light hums on steel, and screens glow with formulas that once would have been drawn in chalk on cell walls. The old dream persists, translated, not lead to gold, but pledge to prosperity. Ink to bread. Downstairs, guards nod. Upstairs, plates are inked. In the long room beyond, presses hum. Hidden schools did not promise secret empires. They kept 4 tools polished for those who steady crowds or calm markets. Timing first. They taught the hush before the bell, the launch at dawn instead of noon, the meeting arranged when nerves were soft. A rite works because the hour agrees to carry it. Even now, committees breathe easier when the calendar is tuned, as plans land like rain from a careful hand. Symbolism next. They saved alphabets of Sinskis that open obedience, a candle for patience, a scale for fairness, a star for hope. Institutions borrowed the grammar, logos as household emblems, robes that make roles visible, badges that lend speech a frame. Meaning walks ahead of orders and makes room. Scarcity is the third tool. Cloisters counted grain and copied books slowly to teach value the weight of waiting. Rooms ration, access limited seats, embargoed reports, premium tiers not as meanness, but to point attention and keep noise from drowning signal. When not abused, scarcity curates focus. When abused, it curdles into gait. Finally, spectacle, the gentlest lever that moves heavy things. Processions became parades, pageants became broadcasts, inaugurations learned old steps. The trick the schools kept was scale. Never so much glitter that the center melts, never so little that nerves fray. Around these four, they stored smaller arts. How to seat rivals so their elbows touch just enough. How to write clauses that double as lullabies. How to end a meeting with silence wide enough for agreement to settle. Their gift was not mystery for its own sake, but memory you can use. So our world wears modern fabrics over ancient bones. Universities scheduled by lit, courts dress in symbolic black, banks choreograph lines, hospitals ration rooms and light, theaters of state rehearse the same old beat. If the tools seem invisible, it is only because they fit the hand. We will follow them forward, quiet instruments tuned for large rooms, carried by people who think they are only doing their jobs. Outside, windows brighten one by one, and avenues draw constellations no priest named. The city lights become new stars.